Welcome back to Over the Edge podcast. This week we have a special guest, Jamie Ratermann. Jamie is a holistic business coach and podcast host, helping rebellious entrepreneurs hit six figures by design through confident content creation, meaningful marketing, and growth mindset practices. With 14 plus years building 50 plus brands, including TripAdvisor and TEDx speakers, to new heights and revenue, Jamie loves to help entrepreneurs not only use social media to build their business, but to love the process. You can listen to her podcast, Limitless, and to listen on all things marketing, business growth, and breaking through your limiting beliefs. Welcome, Jamie, to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about this 14 plus year journey that you've been on in your own business.
Well, so what's so fun about the 14-year journey is I was originally from the Midwest, moved to New York City, and the 14 years is like I recently got told I was allowed to be called a New Yorker from a New Yorker, like born and bred. So like that's
Big.
part of it, right?
Yeah.
But I started my career working in marketing. So I was working for those bigger brands, like I mentioned, TripAdvisor. So I was the kind of person that loved to be it's the Gemini curiosity. I love to get my hands dirty. I learned everything about social media, but I also too was like learning how it all works to turn into a sale, different things like that. So I did that for my first 6 years of my career, and while I loved it, I was burnt out. I was working a ton. I was trying to prove myself, and I left feeling as if like I wanted something different. So what's been lovely about the last 8 years about being an entrepreneur is that I get to work with tons of people who are so passionate about it. But, you know, we aren't really taught about how business works. We're really not taught about like what it means to sell. And I think one of the things that has been, even for myself, as I learned the process is that to be a really good salesperson, you gotta like look at it like science instead of like a measure of self-worth. So a lot of what I do now is not only I want people to enjoy their business. I want them to feel fulfilled by what they do, but also like be able to have this structure that just makes things like work more smoothly so you can be fulfilled outside of your business as well.
Absolutely. Okay, two things. First of all, I'm also a Midwest girly that moved to New York right out of school.
Oh, amazing. Wait, where in the Midwest specifically?
Oklahoma.
Okay, Oklahoma. I'm Ohio. I'm
Oh my
Ohio.
gosh. I live in Los Angeles now because I moved to New York for about a year, and then I was always like, how long do you have to be in New York before you can call yourself a New Yorker? So congratulations on that milestone. That's
It was
major.
big. I
That's
think I
major.
scared her a little bit. I'm like, are you serious? Can I say it to other people? And she's like, yes, you can.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So same. Leaving the Midwest to chase big dreams is uh, a big deal. And then second, same. That's the thing that really tripped me up when I started as a creative was that I thought I'll go be a creative. I didn't realize that I have to be a business person first. I have to learn how to sell more than anything. Like that's always the priority, and that's hard as a creative. Do you see that when you work with people?
Oh, totally. And I think, what's part of it is that there's some, messaging online about like being an entrepreneur is so easy. Just do what you love, you make money. And like to the core of it, yeah, like 60% of it, you should do what you love. Like it should be what you love. But like I said, 60% of it needs to be that because there's the other 40% that you're going to have to like work through some limiting beliefs. You're going to have to learn some admin. You're going to have to learn how to delegate to people. Like there's going to be the hard that almost makes the things that are like you're passionate about more sweeter.
Mhm.
But I think the unfortunate side of it is that there's just too much touting about like entrepreneurship is freedom, and it's like no, like entrepreneurs who have figured out a foundation, who have practices, who don't have to like come up with something each day when they wake up, like those are the people that are feeling the freedom versus like I love what I do and I'm just going to do what I love every single day. It's like how can you create a structure that allows that to be convenient
Mhm.
and inspiring to you?
Absolutely. So can you take us through what you see as the state of marketing and sales as a creative in 2024?
It's such a big question.
It
There's so many
is.
ways I can talk about it.
Or I can narrow it down a little bit because I feel like things have shifted in the last 2 years specifically. I feel like things have shifted dramatically, and as we're talking right now, I'm planning a podcast for this week that you and I are recording, and I've just recorded about how things have shifted in the last couple of years. What are we looking at? Things like that. Like I just did a solo episode on that. And because that has been so top of mind, I feel like in the last 2 years, everything is different. Content is different. The way things land is different. So can we talk about that a little bit? What have you seen change?
I mean, SEO is huge. I think that's one of the biggest things I would say. Like if someone asked me right now, like what has shifted so many things the most, it's SEO, and AI might be like right behind that. But
Mhm.
I think that's what's different. Is like so when I had a lot of people who I helped, like I had a boom in my own business when in 2020 when people were coming in, and it was like you really could post just about anything. Like you, as long as you posted something, as long as it had a good meaningful story behind it, like the idea was like if you were experiencing it, somebody would probably like it, and you would also be seen. You would be seen, especially with reels and like the introduction of that. There was a lot of it. Now it's like if you don't know who your audience is, you're going to have trouble. And if you're not creating content around like how they are seeking out information,
Mhm.
you're going to have trouble. Now, I'm the kind of person that I would rather you build a habit of enjoying creating, and then we can get into like really finessing it, because the more you post, the more you're going to get seen. But I think the people that lack the deeper market research are
Mhm.
probably having a little more trouble right now.
Oh, that's interesting. So can you take us through what you'd recommend in order to get into that market research? Because I see a lot of creatives get very like frozen a little bit when it comes to the market research of it all, because it can feel scary or opaque. How do you
Mhm.
recommend people kind of start on that journey?
Well, there's levels to it for sure. So I mean, I think with anything when you're walking into a business, you got to think about what problem am I solving? So like going back to the basics, and then how do I uniquely solve it? So being able to look at in general, what are people trying to alleviate in their life? It doesn't matter what type of business you're in. If you're a painter, something that like they want to feel that they have some type of trademark, some type of creative culture in their home, some type of meaning to the way they decorate. Like there's a lot to it. They want to create a safe space. Like so there's so many there, like outside of the skill that you bring, like what does like hanging a painting, but versus someone who's a coach going like, okay, how am I giving accountability? How am I helping them see their issues? Like so like really being able to dial down like what are the problems that I'm solving. So when you get a good idea of that, now this is just like introspection. You can think about, okay, like what is it that I really want to help people with? From there, you want to go seek out information. So um, things like Google search, things like related topics are a good place to start. So if I'm searching for, we're talking about social media, how to sell on social, I can see what people are searching based off of the auto type as well as related topics. I can start there. Ask the Public is a really great place to go to as well. So these are just tech options. But
Mhm.
then from there, let's say you've built up an audience, you can start asking in your stories. You can be like, which of these topics are you feeling most challenged by right now? Or like what would you like content around? So like these are basics, right? So
Mhm.
I think the biggest side of it is like getting your feet wet, using the technology you have. From there, you want to go a little further. So market research, you can do one of like so a lot of people's ideal clients end up being someone who's like themselves, but like 3 years prior, which is
Mhm.
great. I think that's
Mhm.
fantastic. If I could give like to 18-year-old Jamie a whole bunch of like insight, she would like things would happen so fast. So like I love that. But being able to go like, okay, what did I experience? Lean into that and then find people who are currently feeling that way. So my clients love and hate it, but I encourage like 5 to 7 30-minute interviews of going like, how do you feel about this? What would it mean if you could find the solution for this? What would your life look like? Getting really deep into understanding what that is. From that, if you have these really great conversations, you can get a really deep focus on your content. So I had a client recently create a whole series about what brand colors mean to them, because like they're like, I didn't think anyone would be interested in this, and it like we did a whole series on it, and people saw her as this authority and expert from it. I had another client who was talking about how to design your life, and it was very specific to mom entrepreneurs who forget themselves all the time. So the idea is like they use that language directly in their content, but
Mhm.
also because they are speaking in the words of their clients, it's easy to talk about, here's my training, here's my offer, because they already feel seen. I think that's the number one thing. If you know you're doing your marketing right, if somebody goes, it felt like you were speaking directly to me. So
Ooh.
that's like a really big piece of this, of the pie here.
How do you find the balance between speaking to your viewers' experience or speaking to an audience experience versus sharing what your own experience is within whatever it is you're making? Basically, I guess my question is how often, like, how do you look at the balance of content between speaking to somebody about their experience and in their experience and or speaking about this is what I'm doing or what I'm experiencing, like an I and a you situation? Is there a
Totally.
balance there? Because I feel like lately I've heard a lot of people, I don't know, I've heard some conversations and opinions, and I'm really curious what your opinion is.
I mean, I honestly think there's room for both. I would definitely say when Reels came out, there was a lot of educational, here's 3 tips to, here's how to like a lot of the step by steps. And I think there's still room for those. I would call those like educational pieces because they're good for growth. They're good for awareness because that's kind of what people are seeking out. But switching it into authority content, that is like, here's how and like you're
Oh.
more of in a showing side of things than telling. So being able to say like, here's how I actually implement it. And there's a sense of extra trust. So if someone was to ask me how much educational versus authority, I'm like, if you decide to do, more authority than educational, you're gonna do well because there's a sense of like they're not just like regurgitating where they saw tips elsewhere on the internet. They're talking about their own process through getting to where they're at, and I want to get to that milestone moment as well.
Okay. Okay. So there we've got educational content, we've got authoritative content. What other types of content are we thinking about in the current state of marketing?
I would say inspirational, so like mostly kind of playing into like where they want to go, be able to talk to that, and then of course there's the relatable. I would say relatable, engaging content. So you can see it in some of the meme content that's out there, but ultimately being able to talk about like, yeah, here's the struggle that we all have. I'm gonna take myself off the pedestal and share a little bit about like, let's be real, this isn't easy to do, or this is what happens when you get to a certain point.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Where do you feel like there, in terms of sharing and sharing like the real stuff and the hard stuff, do you feel like there's a line there, or do you feel like uh, is it is even that curated, or do you feel like people are being, I don't know, I'm curious what you think about when in terms of sharing the hard stuff, sharing the real stuff. How far is far enough to go with it? How far is too far to go with it?
I get asked this question all the time, and it's usually like about like how much people want to share personal details online, like or personal struggles with their stories. Everyone's a little different. Like I feel like I like to relate this to, you have a friend group. There's some friend groups that are like in your friends that are an open book. You know what they ate in the morning, and it comes naturally to them, and they want to share those things. And then there's also the friends who take a little bit of time to open up, but when they do, they share some really good stories, stuff like that. So I think there's, just to say it, like as far as like how much to share about yourself, we relate to people that we feel we can connect with. So if you aren't sharing anything about yourself, just understand that there is a strategic, but also community that's waiting to hear, that like wants to relate to you. Do
Mm,
you have to be, if you are naturally kind of a closed off type of person, do you have to be the person that shares every little detail about themselves? Absolutely not. I think the missing piece here is understand that there's a advantage.
mhm,
So what does that look like to you? I've absolutely had clients that it's so easy for them to turn the camera on themselves. They're ready to go ahead and share about all their details. And that's fantastic. Usually for them, I might have to help them like reel it in. Like, okay, so what is like, please share about your personal life. Great. How can we also talk about how
mhm,
this relates to an offer, how this relates to what you're selling, how this relates to like what you want your account to mean?
mhm,
And then there's the other side of things where people don't share it all, and all they are business accounts, and they feel like it's just like this is hard wall. So it's the ability to think about, like, for instance, I like to use this as an example a lot with clients, is that I've gotten a few one-on-one clients now from my talk of SpongeBob SquarePants. I know the first 3 seasons like the back of my hand,
mhm,
and I'll share about the offers that I have. I'll share
mhm.
about those things. Well, usually in my stories more often, but then I'll make a joke of, hey, if you want me to quote the first episode of SpongeBob, I got you. And what that ends up doing is I'm just bringing down the barrier. I'm not blocking them. They're like, oh, I know it too. I'm like, I didn't know this about you. And then they ask about the other thing. So it's just a little easier for somebody, especially on the socials, to relate on some like easy topics to connect on versus not.
Okay, that's so interesting because that I'm having my own revelations right now because for a long time I showed up and I shared a lot. I didn't feel like I got too personal, but I did get personal on my socials and that was fine to me. And then in the last few years I've been in a space of like I don't want to share anything personal. I got married last year and I didn't even share it. I didn't even post it on my not on my like business like not on my business account, like not on my page or creative. And I just, I don't know. I had trouble being like, I don't know if I want to let in social media to this part of my life, but at the same time, it does feel like a barrier. I mean, people have always been engaging with me in personal terms, and that has always been appropriate in a good way. Like that has never been bad. So I don't know. I'm in a weird space right now on my own of like, okay, I think I do want to share more. How do I go back to sharing these more personal details? Without feeling like I'm flooding the zone or something like that, like how do you know?
Yeah, I feel like it's you kind of got to reverse engineer it a little bit.
Mm,
Like what's your threshold? So like being able to say like how would I like them to know me? Like how well would I like them to know me? And I think I went through phases of that too where I was like where I especially during COVID, I swear I was like here's what I'm eating, here's my workouts,
mhm.
here's my boyfriend. Now he's not my husband. We could talk about married life after this. But being like I shared all the details, and while I don't like frown on that, now I'm just kind of like it's a lot of work to always be thinking about what I'm going to post
Yeah.
versus how would I just like people to relate to me. So like I'll share
Mm.
small details about, I was sharing with you before we pressed record that I hosted a bachelorette party over the weekend, and I'll share details like that. I love sharing my wedding. I won't lie. It was like
I love that.
I
Yeah.
spent the money on these beautiful photos, and they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's the ability to be able to say like, I don't share my relationship a ton. My husband lovingly, he's like, yeah, you can put me in your content, but he doesn't want to be in it all the time.
Mhm.
So when I do share it, it's like the people that are hanging out like are so excited. Like he's like a star, and he's like finally we get to hear about you in credit. The ability to understand that we have these fans that like we
Mhm.
don't have to cater. Like they actually don't want us to share everything if we're uncomfortable. It's going to feel
Mhm.
ingenuine, right?
Right.
But the ability to go like, okay, how would I like them to know me? I'm a romantic person. I'm very caring. I really love. So I want to share some of the relationships I have in my life, but I'm also going to be talking about how I've built myself up and what it looks like in my business. So like the ability to kind of give these like seeds to people to talk to me feels a little more easy.
Oh, I love that. Okay. That feels like a good starting point. I think next week I will challenge myself to ask myself, what do I want people to relate to? And just post that because I feel like I think I posted once or twice in the last month, and that's almost nothing. And then I'm like, well, why are inquiries slow? Hello, I'm not showing up anywhere.
Like what, like oh I'm like hanging out. I'm hanging out and I'm not. No one has seen my face. Why is no one want to talk to me?
Why did everybody forget that I exist? Oh, right. I stopped showing up. Not that I necessarily think people forget about us if we don't show up, but I took a significant break from social media for a while and it did impact my business. And I thought that was interesting because I was really curious about that metric and I was fine with it. I kind of expected it, but I did notice that as soon as I started posting again, things ticked back up. And that might be a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, actually. Do you feel like social media is that ingrained?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly like I think people like to talk about like how hard it is to post, different things like that, but at the end of the day, like we use social media not only to like engage with people, but there's like statistics out there. If like let's say I meet you at a networking event, I'm gonna look at your website and your Instagram, statistically speaking,
Mhm.
before I even consider like let's get a coffee, let's do that, let's do these things. So aside from posting every day, if you don't have a presence,
Mhm.
you're like even the work you're doing in person is going to be a little bit slower. So there's a sense of like it's so ingrained in our lives. You get to decide like how much you use it, but really being able to be visible online is going to pay off no matter what. No
Mm.
matter what. Even if you're getting 200 views instead of 1,000 views. It's still like you are going to be showing that you are invested in your business. You know what you're talking about, but also any of the other work you're going to do is only going to be amplified because of it.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, one of the other reasons I feel like it's such a treat to have you here is because you are an expert at selling. And I think this is a really big conversation for creatives and a really important conversation. Over the years, have learned to love selling. I think it's fun. I think it's a treat. I love connecting with people on those conversations.
Yes, amazing.
But I know that not everybody feels that way. So let's get into it a little bit. Can you talk to us about your approach to selling for creatives?
So the number one thing I think with any type of selling is that we kind of have to understand that if you decide to start a brand, if you decide to start a business, we like to talk about all the hats we wear. Salesperson is one of them. So if that for any reason like kind of makes your stomach kind of crunch up and like kind of you're like I don't want to, it's going to directly affect how long you're in business. It's just we're just being a little bit frank here. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
why do we feel that ick? A lot of the things that come up with selling is that, we've had bad experiences before. We don't know if we deserve money. There's so much mindset and limiting belief work that has to be a part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, I've definitely like I can give people strategies all day long, but their ability to apply them has a lot to do with how they feel about themselves. So usually whenever we just to get started, I will talk with clients about let's start just uncovering what your relationship is currently to money. Like what is it currently? So usually we uncover some limiting beliefs from parents and like understand like where it is. And a big part of it is like awareness is such a big part of it. So like for me, I was privileged enough that my family like had enough money to feed us. They were great. Like it was amazing. But how much like my mom was at Walmart like frugally looking through things and going like, "Oh, I don't deserve the expensive things. I don't deserve to ask for this much more." There was a lot of those like ingrained in me, and just being able to go like, "Okay, I know I have this pattern. The only way I fix this is to regulate a little bit." So emotionally, be able to
Mm-hmm.
say like, "Hey, like I'm safe. It's possible. This is where like the holistic side of this comes in, is like being able to like to understand how your nervous system can really affect this.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to create evidence that that's not true and bring in a new belief through action. So what does it look like, even in a small way, to rebel against these patterns? So being able to say, I'm going to sell in my stories every day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to decide that like I'm not going to sell in a way that feels icky, because I would prefer it to feel like a natural next step. Let me create a structure to do that. So I think there's a sense of like understanding why you've got the ick.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's got a little bit of the ick, but your task is to slowly detach from it. I call it like personal, like radical
Mm-hmm.
personal detachment. So like be like really looking at the sales process of it has nothing to do with your self-worth,
Mm-hmm.
just has to do with how warm is your audience or the people you're talking to the offer that you're trying to put out there.
And I feel like that ick, like we think it's keeping us safe and maybe even keeping our potential clients safe. And the truth is, it's just working against us in the end because it's not real. We don't have to feel that way about a process that can be really exciting and really beneficial to everybody.
Totally. And I feel like the ones that are like, oh, I hate how pushy sales can feel, different things like that. I know men that are good at this. I'm not. I want to put it out there, but we've just been kind of inundated with the cold DMs and
Mhm.
the sense of like, you need this from me, and really this is again what I love about what social media has done for us is that if you are trying to get people to need you, if you're
Mhm.
trying to tell people that they're not good without it, people might buy, but they're going to resent the hell out of your business. So
Yeah.
I like to teach what I call like a relationship based messaging. So being able to think about what does it look like once they work with you? How can you speak into positive terms about where they're heading? And that ends up just changing the tone, energy of the conversation. So that even if they do say no, it's just like, oh, it's not my priority right now. I want to still be in your world. There's a big difference. There's such a big difference.
Absolutely. My favorite thing on a sales call, if somebody is not yet to the yes, which is totally fine because especially with high ticket packages, like that can be really scary to just get on a call and say, okay, I'm ready. Even though a lot of people are sometimes, and that's good too. My favorite advice to leave people with if we're on a sales call and they want a minute to think about is I ask people to meditate on it. I say, sit with it. It'll feel nervous. You'll feel nervous, but you'll feel excited. That'll be the number one thing. And I love to ask people to just sit with it. Like,
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that's a great way to kind of wrap up a call without feeling like how, like, because I never want to push anybody for anything, right? Like, I know that's a sales tactic, but it's kind of old school and no one's into
So
it anymore.
every single time I've been on a sales call with like I'm the person that's supposed to be buying and they're like, "Can you give me your credit card?" And I'm like, "Give me the link." Like you don't
Yeah.
do this. Like you don't got to do this. Like just give me the link and I'll do it. Like there's
Yeah.
that sense of like feeling like caged on a call is
Mhm.
the like not a
Yeah.
single one of my clients uses it because I'm like, "Don't do it." We know the feelings that come from it and they're and like it
Mhm.
like there's been a few times where I'm like, oh man, like I've been like, oh
Mhm.
man, I was so in until you just did that. I was
Yeah.
like, I'll be
Yeah.
very clear, like you're making me feel trapped and I don't want this. So I think what I again like this sales used to be like I have a thing, buy it. Now
Yeah.
it's like I trust the person behind the brand and the offer seems solid. So like
Mm.
the idea has a lot to do of there's a lot more trust building in sales. Again, like thanks social media to a certain point here and like being able to understand that like this person has like is invested in my success just as much as I'm invested in like spending my money with them. So being able to create a sales experience that feels natural and warm and
Yeah.
easy, like we have the ability to change the way sales feel. And that comes from
Absolutely.
branding, but also just creating a bit of a structure.
I love that. I remember the first time I got the advice to take a credit card on the call. Like I had a friend who she's great at sales and she was like, you should just take their credit card on the call. And I'm like, I can't wrap my brain around that. I don't know that I could ever get that out. I don't know. It always felt so weird to be like, okay, what can I have your credit card? And if I'm saying it weird, people are going to feel that too. You know,
Yeah.
if I show up and I'm unsure of it myself, people are then going to be unsure of it. But yeah.
I find it so silly. Like it just like feels like you don't trust them. Like
Yeah.
you're going like, oh, you said you want to join? Great. Now give me your credit card so I gotta put the
Yeah.
numbers because I don't trust your word. Like it's such a odd experience. Like
Exactly.
maybe and I should say either I'm sure there's data out there that says that they might close more sales, but I would absolutely love to see like how invested they are in the program after, or if they're how much buyer's remorse they might have if they felt like they were had to do it that way.
Oh, those would be some interesting numbers for sure.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. How do you recommend to people? You talked about calming your nervous system and regulating yourself around sales. How do you recommend approaching that process if somebody's new to it?
So I mean, definitely understanding like, okay, what is going on when you are feeling that elevated feeling, like really starting from there. Like I especially a lot of my clients who are people pleasers, they think it's a burden or they're not worthy of it. So like you have to understand that. But as far as like really getting a grounded way within your nervous system is one, meditation, walking, like it's not just for the movement, it's not just for the exercise, it's literally like your part of your brain is going to tell you like fear, 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 stop. Like you're in an elevated state. Like that's what's happening. And that being able to find practices that bring you just down and a little more grounded. I like to tell clients to do raspberries if they don't have a lot of like they're not in it. Like so like literally blow, I feel it'll be weird on the mic right now, but like blowing raspberries can just like help their whole face feel massaged and their whole and like their throat
Mm,
relax. And it's just getting out of the state of like fight or flight. That's definitely a good place to start. But like I said, like the third part of this equation is, do you have a system? Like, do you know, like, okay, if someone hops on a call with you, how, like, are they likely had a number of interactions with you through social, through your email?
mhm,
Like what's the level of engagement you have? Even to like, how do you walk into a sales call without being desperate? Like being able to say like, I know that my offer is worthy of the cost that it is. I feel that like I can deliver for this person. Like having a few of those affirmations walking in and going, if they're a yes, great. If they're a no, same feelings. I want to
mhm,
keep pursuing it because the desperation turns into, cutting your prices, turns into coupon clipper clients who don't really fully engage in the program. So there has to be a way of like, how do I
mhm,
really get myself into a safe place? Like I think safety is such a big part of money. If you don't feel
Mhm.
safe asking for more, if you don't feel safe about the prices you choose, like even too, if you don't feel safe, if you get a sale or you don't get a sale, it's going to be a drastic difference.
I want to underline that money and safety. Those are so connected. And the blowing raspberries is legit. I have my clients do that on set while we're taking photos because it does. It relaxes your face, it relaxes your whole body. Shake it out.
I
That's
love
so
that.
true. I
I
always,
do like stink face dancing during photo shoots. I get in my head, but I'm like, okay, let's do
yeah,
some stink faces, and then I'll start laughing, and then it works out. But it's like definitely like getting some type of movement helps.
absolutely. Whatever makes you laugh and makes you just go, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
Um, and I always feel like whenever I'm getting on a sales call, I feel like if somebody's getting on a sales call for me, they're already a yes. And I feel like my
Mm,
biggest job on a sales call is get out of my own way, right? My job is to not overtalk something. My job is to just be clear, direct, and confident, answer questions, guide the call where it needs to go, right? I need to give specific information that people need to have before they can say yes, right? Because I don't want them to be surprised after the fact that like, oh, hair and makeup's not included, right? Those kinds
right.
of things. But I always feel like if somebody's getting on a sales call with me, they're taking it seriously that they're probably at a yes. And my biggest job is like, get out of my own way.
I mean, that's such a great point for the fact that some people walk into a sales call thinking they're on there to negotiate and persuade somebody,
Hmm.
and that shouldn't be what a sales call is. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
there we could talk about roles of sales pages and different things for sure, but like they usually people are like, okay, I'm ready for a sales call. They want their questions answered. They want to
Yeah.
be listened to more than they want you to tell them like why this program is the best thing you've ever heard in your life. Like I usually I will have the would you like me to talk about the program? I don't run into like it most of the time like, oh no, I read the site. Do you think I'm good for this or that? Like they're it's the sales calls are for them.
Hmm.
So like if you walk into it with proving energy, ooh, it's hard. Like you're
Yeah.
like they're not feeling listened to. It's just there's a lot to be said about just the dynamics of that conversation. Like what is the true objective that
Hmm.
they feel really cared for and ready to say yes.
Absolutely. And I also feel like if a client is for you, like if you're meant to work with somebody, like it's hard to knock somebody off that path. Like I've taken sales calls where I get on and I'm so excited about it, but I'm so in my head that by the end of it, I'm like, I am sure that I have totally blown this, right? I'm convinced that I messed up the sales call. And then I get an email an hour later that's like, can't wait, let's do it. And I feel like if there are people you're meant to work with, like the pressure is off. Like it's gonna be okay.
Totally, totally. And I think this plays to the detachment piece, like that being able to say, like I'm good no matter what. So if you can like this is what's fun about this. I've absolutely had clients who have been on a call and they're like, "Ooh, I can't handle this." And I'm like, "It's totally fine. Here for you when you're ready."
Mhm.
And like and being able to walk off that call going, I'm allowed to feel like, "Oh, I would love to have gotten it," but being able to say, "I'll be fine. I'm okay." And then I meant to look it up because I want to talk about it with my upcoming program, but like the I would probably say I'm in a 70% arena of the people who
Uh-huh.
said, "Oh, it's too much for me." They come back a few months later, like, "We're ready. It's time to go. Let's
Yeah,
go ahead." Like people have to have time to decide what their priorities are, especially when it comes to their money. So the idea that you have to like persuade them,
hmm,
absolutely. Even too, like I love that you're kind of saying like you thought maybe you like bungled the sales call. Like
yeah,
how many times I've like been like, I've definitely been a little better than that, but the fact that they've spent time with me in my socials, they've spent time, like they may have asked other people about me, they've looked at my pages, like they have all of that, that even if I'm not like 100%
mhm.
perfect about the sales call, like my past self has given that extra little confidence boost that they're like, oh yeah, she's still like she answered what I needed, even if it was like she needed a little more coffee that day. Like it's totally okay.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. I find so to me, the most thrilling thing is when somebody says, like if we're on a call and somebody says, I need to save up money to do this, but I'll come back to you. And I'm always like fingers crossed about it, but never sure how it's gonna go. I think the most thrilling thing is when somebody has saved the money and is like, I'm ready now.
Oh my gosh,
Isn't
yes.
that amazing? That's like, I just, I just think that's one of the most exciting things in business and it feels so meaningful. Like,
No,
wow.
definitely. Definitely.
right?
The idea of like saving up money. I've actually had people go like, I want this. I'm going to put you on my vision board. I'm like, I'm
Ooh.
happy to be on your vision board, babe. Like that sounds lovely. I'm here for it. So again, like it's I don't like I think I'm getting all emotional about it, but it's like when you feel like you bring this much service and it's something you love doing,
Mhm.
the sales come when they're supposed to, and like you got to trust that timeline a little bit. But that comes through, showing up and like making sure people who are interested see you, but
Mhm.
also a lot of that internal work of going like, I'm in this for the long haul. I know how to do this. I know how to build trust with people.
I love that. So I do have one more question. It is my sliding doors question, but before we get to that, I do want to hear about your program. Tell us what you've got going on, how people can find you and connect with you.
So I am launching a new program called Money Mastery Academy, which I'm so excited about. It is exactly what I've been talking about. How do you build a sales structure? We do a ton of money mindset work, but I have built it in a way that like you know exactly what to post, you know exactly the process, and it's in a paced way that allows you to build that foundation. It's my first course group program that is 6 months long. So it's being able to live your life while you build your business, but it's essentially the step-by-step plan to hit those six figures and to do it in a way that allows you to, spend less time in your business once you build it. So I'm super excited about it. I gave you a link to that, but I also wanted just to give a little extra of being able to know exactly how your Instagram bio gets to be a good starting point. So there's a bio breakdown free training for anyone who's listening. So feel free to take a peek.
Amazing. I will have all of those links in the show notes. So definitely go through and click like, especially because we're in this new state of marketing. I think the building a foundation of it all is so, I think we're all in that space. Even if I've been doing this for 10 years and I still feel like, you know what, I'm in a rebuilding foundation phase. So highly
Yeah.
recommend if you're in a foundation phase or you're just going bigger, go check out those links. Okay, so my favorite question is the sliding doors question. So listener, if you're new here, what that is the sliding doors question is really a reference to a 1990 late 90s movie with Gwyneth Paltrow where she is going home from work early. She makes the train. She gets home. She sees her boyfriend cheating on her. It changes her whole life. And then they reverse it a little bit and they do a scene where she does not make the train. She does not catch the boyfriend. It does not change her life and her life keeps going. So you see her life play out side by side. And this has always intrigued me so much. So my question is, what is your sliding doors moment that a small thing that changed everything?
So what's really fun about this is I was like, well, I feel like the big moment was my move to New York, but I think what's preceded that was I booked the flight without a job. Like I booked the flight, and my parents never wanted me to leave Ohio. They wanted to like keep me right where I was supposed to be, and like were trying to convince me to stay. And I absolutely like I booked like I didn't have a credit card. It was like my first credit card at the time, and I booked my flight. I booked my flight to New York. So I definitely feel like my sliding doors moment would have been like, oh, I don't want to make my parents mad. And I just remember that conversation of if I wouldn't have done that, I might have nothing wrong with being in Ohio, but like New York has opened me to so many things.
Yeah.
But I still can remember the looks on my mother and father's faces, like, I've booked my flight to New York. It's happening.
Wow. Well,
Like,
and let me ask
yeah,
you
it's
what
happening.
totally, because I did that. You know what? Same. I went to New York without a job. I had saved money from working over summers. And so I went to New York without a job, but it was 2006. And so that felt way more difficult than, say, 2008 or 2010. What year did you move?
I moved in 2012,
Oh,
2012.
wow. Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's a totally different work landscape in 2012 than like
Sorry,
2006.
2011. It was right. It was right. It was December 2011. Sorry, but like my
Nice.
brain's like, how far is
But that's such a different, I mean, everything changed so dramatically after 2008 and 8 in terms of a work landscape. Like that's an even bigger risk by
Oh my gosh.
2011, major.
Oh,
And
I could only imagine. I feel like I want to hear all about how it felt because I can't imagine.
yeah, I think that's incredible. And gosh, I also think that speaks to the deciding of it, right? Because we all have goals, but there's a moment of decision that enters the arena, and it comes down to I talked with a guest one time about how it comes down to essentially booking the ticket. Anything you do in life, any goal you have to book the ticket, or you haven't decided. And deciding is essentially booking the ticket, right?
I feel it's so important. I feel like just as decisions, making choices
Mhm.
is essentially like the way in which you create the life that you want. I think like some people like to talk about uncertainty. I'm like, decide. And like, you know what? Sorry, I don't know if I can curse on this, like, but
Totally.
like decide. You might eat shit, but you're going to be better off because you ate shit versus just like maybe I'll do it, maybe I won't. And
Mhm.
I think that that's a big part of it. And I should say, just to be very clear, I moved because I moved without a job because most places you needed a New York address before they would even consider hiring you.
Yeah.
And I figured my first 3 months was kind of like picking up little things. I was doing my first freelancing. I was eating baby carrots for dinner, and then after that, it was like, oh, I found it, and then it happened. And I think that it's not always just this like it all opens, but the decision being like, I'm my weight is behind it. I'm 100% there. I think
Mhm.
that's such a big deal.
Oh, totally. And you're so right. The reason so I moved to New York and I got a job after about a month, which felt like a miracle. And I did temp work in the meantime. But the reason I remember asking why I got the job, because they had, I think, close to 400 applications for an
Uh-huh.
assistant editor role. And I was like, why'd you guys pick me? Like, kid from Oklahoma. I have no experience. Like, what are we doing? And I did have experience. I had worked in newspapers, but the first thing that they did was they took the pile of applications and anybody who didn't live in New York, they tossed it. And then that narrowed the pile significantly. And that's how I kind of like was able to stay in the pile. Was I lived in New York. You had to have a New York address.
Had to have the address, which
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
like it's more or less you got to take the risk there, or we're not even going to consider you. So I mean, it works out.
exactly.
It worked
It,
out
it
though.
worked out. My goodness, somehow. Well, actually, let's talk about that for a second, because the faith in yourself is where that starts. Like, you
Yeah.
believed that you could do it, come hell or high water. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Totally, totally. I think, like, I think that's huge in all stages. Like, I mean, I think that's what we're really relating to when it comes to mindset stuff, is that if you don't have a belief in self, there's a part of that. But I will say that I had evidence that I can do it. New York was the biggest leap, of course, but like I went to a college and my friends had never gone to. So there was like a little bit of that evidence that I was like, oh yeah, no, I believe in myself. And then I also studied abroad.
Mhm.
And I did, I had little rebellious moments that led up to me being that like full belief. And I think that sometimes people like to talk about, I mean, I hear a lot of this in my space of like quantum leaps, and you definitely can, like you can go from making $1,000 a month to $10,000. Like you can do that. But the ability to manage how it feels to expand yourself like that, like there, you can do it in small ways. You can do it in like just getting a little bit rebellious. So for me, like belief in self, it has a lot to do with how you talk to yourself. Like doing a little, like I like to talk about like the internal board of directors. So
Mhm.
not just an inner, if you only let your inner critic speak, there
Yeah.
you need to hire some more board of directors. So like
Yeah.
I like to talk about it like your wise self, like the one who's like figured things out, your thriving self, so like your future self, and then
Mhm.
like your safety self. So like the person
Nice.
who's like the strong one who's always going to keep you safe. I always think it's like Thor. Like you're like I think of Thor being like my safe self, like making sure like you've got this. Like you're like
Yeah.
I usually have like the idea of this in mind,
Yeah.
and like having this just like you're going to have internal chatter no matter what, but how can you kind of like, okay, wait, hold on, let me let my wise self speak now. I
Mhm.
get my inner critic, she wants me to be safe, she knows we're comfortable where we are.
Mhm.
But if I invite my safe self, like what's he say, like, well, here's all the reasons why you're going to do it, here's all the reasons why it's going to work out for you. So just
Mhm.
creating a more growth set like internal world,
Mhm.
and understanding why you have those beliefs can, or those limiting beliefs can just be this way of like, okay, I have them, they're feelings though, they're not facts.
Mhm.
I'm going to create a new experience. So like for me, my belief in myself, while I want to say like I've just always been this way, it had a lot to do with creating little rebellious moments throughout my life.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so number one, we cannot let the inner critic be chairman of the board in our minds. No. Who do you make chairman of the board for yourself?
I think my thriving self, like my future self, like the
Thriving self.
person
Love it.
I'm becoming, like she's there just like waiting
Mhm.
for, she's just waiting for me to like be at the front too. Like she's like, all right, get here when you're ready. Like, come on, let's go.
I love that. And then in terms of like, okay, so I think it's fun that you brought up the quantum leaping because this is something I've been seeing a lot of lately is people talking about quantum leaping in terms of making a massive shift, right? Making the move or just doing something major that can be a huge expansion of your energy and it's something new. But I also think that like that in relation to how much we expand all at once, which can be as much as we want, I also think contraction comes into the game, right? Like our minds are like, ooh, what if we slow down a little bit, right?
Totally.
So I like the way you're talking about it in terms of like these small rebellious acts to still continue to expand, but maybe that feels more manageable over time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it kind of how people do the long jump, like you know how,
Mhm.
or is it the long jump, or maybe it's called another, like where they do like little trots before they do like the big one.
Uh-huh.
I kind of look at it the same way. That'd be like you're kind of building up to the bigger one, and I think there's a side of this where everyone wants more money, everyone wants more freedom, everyone wants these things, but the ability to realize that like when you do become a six-figure business, like you're holding a little bit more.
Mhm.
And if you're still operating from the person who's scared about how people feel about them, like scared that they're like there's going to be haters, scared that they're like they don't have the tools yet
Mhm.
to be able to like turn down the volume of like the things that shouldn't like really don't affect them or their clients,
Mhm.
you're going to have trouble when you get to these higher moments. So like when you're talking about the contraction, there's a little bit of like, yeah, absolutely. You're going to have, there's quantum leaps, but there's also quantum crumbles. There's also where someone thought that they were going to expand, this usually comes when someone like puts up a really big price.
Mhm.
I've met somebody who like was like doing 50K for the whole year of coaching. And I was like, wow, that's a big price. It's great. And then people came back and told her like oh, you know what, I don't want to do it, I don't want to do this program anymore. And
Mhm.
like her ability to deal with just as like the hard part just as much as the yes, like
Mhm.
that was like she had to, it was almost like the universe going like, you ain't ready
Mhm.
unless you can deal with this hardship. And I think that's part of what in my on my best moments, life is supposed to be a bit of a struggle so that you appreciate when you're having the big wins. If you don't appreciate the struggles, the wins are never going to feel sweet. And if you don't celebrate the wins, the struggles aren't going to feel worth it. So like being able to have a little bit of both. So if you want a quantum leap, how are you staying safe right now?
Mhm.
How are you ignoring your feelings? How are you ignoring your thoughts? What is a small way for you to get a bit rebellious? So like I think like people think this is all business. For me, I had a little bit of a fear of being seen, and like I
Mhm.
had a fear of like how I looked and what it was. And my little rebellious act was like to take off my like exercise shirt in the middle of a completely dark like Soul Cycle class, and I'm just in my sports bra, and I'm like, I'm allowed to be the way that I am in this space. And like even it felt small, but it was like I did that thing that I was too scared to do, and now it just creates more of a frequency for anywhere else that I was like feeling that fear of being seen.
I love that. Actually, can you talk a little bit more about those small rebellious acts? Like that kind of specificity I think is so interesting. And I think you're completely like that's so true and so such a good way to start into it. Like even if we think it's small, it's not that small. It's actually
It's
kind of
not small.
major.
It's
Yeah.
not small. It's like allowing you to make sure you're taking the right, like you're taking the turns on the map to where you want to go.
Mhm.
What are some other small acts? I feel like, solo trips are a big one. Like being able to enjoy your own company, I think was a big one of being able to, when you're deciding to be an entrepreneur, like going on it alone. I'm not saying you have to be, you can be part of communities, but the
Mhm.
idea of like making that decision,
Mhm.
maybe going on a trip can be helpful. Wearing like for me when none of my family wears red lipstick, none of my family wears like different clothes, and I was like, all right, I want to wear the zany,
Mhm.
in my words, zany look.
Mhm.
But everyone else might be like, oh, she's just wearing red lipstick to get today. And it was like it took me a while to get used to
Mhm.
making that shift for me. For people pleasers, it's definitely small boundaries. So like being able to say, like I think the biggest one is like they don't take calls from their mother during a workday. I'm like, okay, can you make sure you only talk to her from after 5 o'clock, and like these like a small boundary with someone who's going to love you unconditionally can help you create boundaries for bigger things. So just small ways, small ways. I'm trying to think of other fears and how you can think of ones, but if you have some, I'm happy to give examples.
No, I love that. I think that's perfect. These small rebellious acts for massive expansion, because all of that adds up. And then one day you find yourself, you're the thriving chairman of the board. You are her all of a sudden. And I love that.
Yeah, yeah, it's creating it through evidence. I like kind of what we're really talking about when people talk about the subconscious and it rules 95% of our decision making is that if you really truly want to change it, you need to be aware,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know how to emotionally regulate, and you have to create change through consistency. So that's how this works. If you want your subconscious to change, you have to choose the thing that they don't naturally choose over and over and over again. So when we do, I don't want anyone to see me. And then you go, okay, I'm going to put on some lipstick. I'm going to try the weird thing that might get me a little more attention. I'm going to take the shirt off in the exercise class. Like you are repeatedly telling your subconscious, like, hey, new software is coming on board. We're uploading, take it or leave it. Here's what's happening. So that the next big quantum leap is like, oh, we've done this before. We can do it again.
I love that. Ah, Jamie, thank you so much. This was such an incredible conversation. I really appreciate you being on the podcast today.
This was so much fun. I could talk about this for hours. So it was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. Thank you.